Good evening and welcome to this week's Black Mental Health is Black Health. I'm your host, Bronwyn Lucas, Miss B, the Black Couch Therapist, here to talk to you about all things that impact the Black community and mental health. Our guest today is David Landry, and he'll introduce himself in a few minutes. If you've been here before, you know what we do. We got to take those deep breaths to breathe in, decompress, de stress from the day before we move on. So here's how we do it. I'll count in to four very slowly, and you'll breathe into four, into that slow count, and then you'll breathe out. So let's get it done. Breathe in, two, three, four. Out. Two, three, four. In. Two, three, four. Out. Two, three, four. One more. In. Two, three, four. Out. Two, three, four. Well, how was that breathing for you, David? It was nice and relaxing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Awesome, awesome. Um, well, our guest tonight is David Landry, and tonight we're talking about why celebrate Black history? What's the big deal? So we're going to discuss that tonight. But before we do, David, you get to introduce yourself and tell us something cool about yourself.
Well, hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Lucas, for allowing me to come out
Just Miss
and
Lucas.
this. Thank you so much for coming, allowing me to come out on your platform and speak to your audience. My name is David Landry. I am a native Houstonian and co-owner and founder of Class Bookstore. And like I said, I'm happy to be here. Oh, something cool about myself.
Yeah, what's something cool about you?
So from college, I have a friend of mine, literally like my best friend. Shouts out to Dominique Roots. We have a hip hop group called DNN, and we have been together since 2007. And we do music that talks about Black empowerment. So that's something cool about myself.
Awesome. That is cool. We might get to talk about that some more at a later time. That is way cool. Well, tonight we're talking about Black history. Why bother to celebrate?
Mhm.
And I've heard people say interesting things about it's not relevant, all these bizarre things. And if you
Yes.
think about our Texas is one of those states that wants to rewrite history because it might hurt somebody's feelings. Well, the truth is the truth. It's history. Um, so we can't let it go. So first off, what are your thoughts about even just why we should celebrate Black History Month?
Well, I think the answer to that question is simple. The reason we should celebrate it is because Black history is not only American history, it's world history. And so, if we don't have a problem with being in Texas and studying Texan history twice in our academic career, like compulsory, we are required by state law to study Texas history in the fourth and the seventh grade, then we shouldn't have a problem with studying Black history either.
I like that. And it is compulsory. Fourth and seventh grade, you have to do it. And back in the day, in order to get a teaching certificate in the state of Texas, you had to take Texas history, regardless of what you were teaching.
There you go.
I was a special ed major. I had to take Texas history again, as you say. So I like that viewpoint. We got to take that. That's part of history.
Yeah.
Let's just go with it. You know, I know and you know, but we're going to talk to our audience because there might be somebody who doesn't know about the role Carter G. Woodson played in Black History Month. I'll let you start. Tell us about your thoughts about Carter G. Woodson.
So, so when we talk about Black History Month and we talk about the celebration of the accomplishments of the contributions, etc., of Black people, not only in America but also throughout the diaspora, we got to give it up to Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Woodson was the, I believe he was the second graduate of Harvard, like second black PhD from Harvard. The first one was W.B. Du Bois. And Carter G. Woodson recognized that black people throughout the country, um, not for the lack of trying, we just weren't taught in school about us. And so he decided to take it upon himself to gather this history and bring it out in the month of February. So many people feel like, ah, man, I chose for each, y'all chose February because it's the shortest month of the year. Well,
Not so.
the reason why he chose it was because of the fact that Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were born in February, and so Carter G. Woodson said, "Okay, this is the time that we're going to take." And it initially started as a week. It wasn't even a month at first. So the fact that we even were able to evolve it and grow it to a month is nothing short of amazing. So, like I said, we got to give it up to Dr. Carter G. Woodson for his contribution and making it a thing that we have.
And it was, during his day, it was called Negro History Week. Um, and it was, and even to get it as a week of study was amazing. Um, and one of the things he realized was that when he began to try to study um, Black history, he couldn't find anybody in the books. It was like, why are these people, why are we not in history books? And he had to search and search and search. I know some people look at this as a time of being inclusive, but it's because we were not included that Black History Month even began. And
Right.
the first, just since we're dropping a little historical knowledge about Black History Month itself, the first Negro History Week was in 1926.
Wow.
And it did not become Black History Month until 1970. So all that time it was a week celebration, and it grew to a month long celebration.
Yeah.
And some people, like you say, oh, well, why? Well, we have Women's History Month, we have Hispanic Heritage Month, we have
Yep.
Asian Pacific Islander Month. And you know what? The sad thing is that we have to have it because these are all marginalized groups that do not find their way into the history books. And even today, now in Texas, we're looking at, well, we don't want to talk about slavery because that might hurt somebody's feelings. It happened. If ignoring history doesn't make it go away. So I think it's very important that we continue to say, no, we got to deal with what's here. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. Um, what would you say to someone specifically in Texas that says, well, we don't really, there's no room for that. They don't teach it in school. Oh well. What would you say to someone who has that viewpoint?
Man, you know what? To be fair and honest, if that person's a black person, I would
Mhm.
I would definitely tell them start with your family history. If you feel like all the stuff that we're learning about black people is irrelevant and nobody cares and all that stuff, start with your family history. Start with who your parents are. Start with who your grandparents are. And try to go back as far as you can, because even though those individuals are not in the history books, they are still making history and have made history. And you never know what you might dig up. For example, I remember years ago talking to my maternal grandmother, um, and she let me know that her great grandfather was W.C. Handy. W.C.
Wow.
Handy, right? A musician, jazz musician. And I was like, wow. And, learning that and going to middle school and looking up in the band room and seeing a poster of W.C. Handy
Mm.
had a whole other level of like pride. and
Yes.
just like, wow, like my family comes from greatness, and that was it. Literally was just on a random day that she was telling us about this, and I knew we had handies in our family on her side, but I didn't know that like just a couple generations ahead of her
Right.
was the late great WC Handy.
And that's the thing. And whether it's someone famous or even infamous in your family, it's worth knowing your family history.
Indeed.
It helps you know who you are. And as African Americans, when we look at our history, we had a whole lot of other in our family,
Mhm.
just by nature of slavery and what happened to our people during slavery, how the women were raped. So you're going to find some of everything in your history. It's part of who we are.
True.
No need to deny it. But it is so amazing to know your family history. In my family history on my father's side, one of the people who was instrumental in Black people getting the opportunity to vote in the primary was my father's uncle.
Hmm.
So not even that long ago, which is why for me voting is so important.
Man.
It's just you have to do that. But when you get to know your own family history, you get to know you. So I agree with you. Go talk to your mama. Go talk to your auntie, your uncle, your daddy. Find out both sides of the family if you can. Um, and just sit down. My grandmother could actually tell you the history of her family all the way back to slavery. And then when you're little, you know what you do. Oh, she's talking about that.
Here we go.
However, I remember just bits and pieces of it, just enough. My and one on my father's side, the first black postmaster in Texas was
Whoa.
on his side. So you'll be surprised when you study your own history. I had the opportunity to interview one of my dad's relatives. Oh, it's been years ago. She was 102
Hmm.
and she knew her history. So we all have that history. What about this whole idea about, well, it makes people uncomfortable to talk about history?
Man, you know what? When we discuss American history, Black history, world history, there always is going to be a segment of the population that is angry,
Hmm.
because it reminds them of their ancestors and how they oppress a marginalized people. And then there's going to be a segment of the population that deals with shame. And that
Hmm.
shame comes from the fact that their ancestors were the ones that were marginalized and oppressed. But at the end of the day, we have to push past the shame. We have to push past the anger and just lay it out. Because once you lay it out and then you can make forward steps towards progress. You can't make forward steps towards progress if the history is being hidden, if it's being amended, if it's being changed, if it's being, what you call it, if it's being whitewashed, if it's being, if the bite and the sting is removed from it.
Hmm.
um, it doesn't do anyone a service. So I believe you should push past that feeling of anger, that feeling of shame, learn what you can from it so that we can become a better society by knowing all of the history.
Excuse me, I totally agree. As I think about that, we can always say what they are and what they are not doing in the school system. I have my thoughts, but what would you say to parents about parents teaching their children their history?
I would say if a parent knows, then they should definitely take the time to teach the history and teach it at their level. Teach the children at their level. Obviously, a pre-K kindergarten student can only understand or conceptualize so much versus a student who's in the upper grades versus one who is in middle or high school, and you give it to them at their level,
Hmm.
at a level of their understanding. If you don't know, you go get the knowledge first, and then bring it back to your family and teach them. Because the first school, the first classroom is our parents, is our mothers, our
Yes.
fathers. Those are the first teachers.
Hmm.
And if the parents aren't giving it to them, we can't expect the school system to provide all the teaching and all the information. We just can't. There's a such thing as a concept of Saturday schools, that happen
Hmm.
where for certain cultures, information was not, they understood that information was not properly being disseminated, and so they took it upon themselves, like, yo, we will teach our kids on Saturdays. And so we'll teach them history, we'll teach them culture, we'll teach the language, and we'll make sure that when we send them back into society, that they'll have a anchor, they'll have a concrete anchor that within them, that lets them know, hey, this is my culture, this is my who my people are, so that I don't get lost in the sauce. And I think that that's something that maybe parents need to do. Take some time on the weekends to go to a library or go to a bookstore, like a class bookstore, and find those books, and ask somebody if you don't know. It doesn't make you look bad if you don't know. Just be open and say, hey, look, I'm trying to teach my kids about Black history, about Texas history, about world history. Can you help me find something? And I'm sure that wherever you go, somebody's going to be there to help you answer those questions and be
Hmm.
able to help you disseminate that information to your kids.
I agree. And I totally agree that it begins in the home. As parents, we have to take it upon ourselves to teach. And I agree. If you don't know, learn. And I would add, if you don't know, even you don't have to go learn first. Learn with them.
Right.
Because if you don't know and you're reading a book that may be at a third grade level to your third grader, you can learn if you don't know. So choose books that are definitely at that level. And if you don't know, learn. And it's no shame in not knowing. It's a shame if you don't know and don't want to know. So yeah, get out, read with your children. Reading, we're going to talk about the bookstore in a minute. Read with your children. It
Oh,
is so important. There's so much to be gained. I know whenever I give a little chocolate child a book, I believe in giving books for gifts. It's going to have chocolate colored people in the book.
yes.
I'm not giving I'm not giving black children books that don't have black people in them because they're going to see enough of that, and I want to do my part in help balancing what they see.
Mhm.
So when it comes to our history, give books. You're right, and when there's some views about who we study. So do we need to go back? And tonight I'm really focusing on just African American.
Yeah,
We do have to study Africa throughout the diaspora.
true
And we
indeed.
have to understand that our history did not start with slavery. We
Right.
need to know that we came over here 200 years before there was slavery, that we traveled much more than Europeans did. And that's how we ended up in different parts of the world, not just because of slavery, but we traveled throughout the diaspora. And
Yes.
so we need to find out about, we were over here when? 1400s, yeah, we were over here in the 1400s, and study that and know that and understand the importance of how deep our history really is. And to that end, we do need to start teaching our children ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't leave it to someone who is not their history, it's not important to them, and it's in their best interest for us not to know. So why would we allow them to be the keepers of something so important? Doesn't make good sense.
Not at
So
all.
we do have to take over, teach our children, form co-ops. Some of those Saturday schools, there are different places that have them, and maybe we need to take time to, do that and start all over again. And let's create these spaces. And it can be for children. And guess what? If parents want to sit in the
And
background, they can too. Because if they don't know, it's a time for everybody to learn.
I'll give you an example. A few years ago, a friend of mine, Curtis Curley, he's a native Houstonian. He lives in Acres Homes, grew up in Acres Homes, and he saw an issue, a problem very similar to what you described. He understood that children weren't learning in the classrooms about their history, including his three children. And so he asked me to come. He was like, "Man, you'll come, to my house and teach my kids about Black history." Matter of fact, it was for Martin Luther King Day. And so we talked about Martin Luther King, we talked about the I Have a Dream speech, but we also talked about other campaigns that he worked on, not just the Montgomery bus boycott. We also talked about the Poor People's Campaign, and we talked
Mm-hmm.
about some of the other movements that Martin Luther King was a part of. And so we eventually, after it went so well that him and his wife asked me to come once a month to work with his kids. And then eventually it expanded to his nieces and expanded to his younger cousins. And we had about a group of 10, 12 kids, and we had their parents sitting on the couches. The kids sit on the floor and the parents sitting on the couches, and we talking about Black history and doing coloring sheets and learning all kinds of stuff. So it can be done. And we called it the compensatory hour because we were compensating for the lack of
Mm-hmm.
the information that they weren't receiving in school. We were compensating for that. And it was 1 hour every month. And then it eventually started becoming more and more prevalent. We were able to take it out of his house. We went to a local library near his home, and eventually we went to one of the community multi-service centers in Acres Home. And so we're thinking about bringing something like that back.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Daniel Blach, we brought him down last year in November, and one of the things that stuck with me, he said that Black people need to create more spaces and places for us to learn our history and learn who we are and learn our culture. And I think we may need to bring that back. So don't be surprised if you hear us talking about bringing something similar to compensatory hour to Class Bookstore.
Love it. And I've actually been thinking about doing something. I have a meeting later this month about unrolling an idea to do something similar.
Cool.
So I might have to call you again and we collaborate.
For
You've already
sure.
done it, so hey, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a few minutes left. It's winding down quicker than you think. I want to know about your bookstore. We've been talking about books and
Mhm.
reading. Um, Tell my audience about your bookstore.
Thank you. So I'll give you the elevator speech. Class Bookstore. We are a mobile, online, and brick and mortar bookstore. We started during the pandemic lockdown. November 2020 is our official month of origin. And we started online first. Had a website, built it out. Eventually, a couple months later, in 2021, January 2021, we started doing pop ups around the city. And so we did pop ups for about 2 years, selling books, and people asking us, "Man, when y'all got a brick and mortar, y'all got a brick and mortar." So I guess me and my wife looked at each other one day and was like, "Hey, we got to figure out how to get this brick and mortar thing." But we would look at real estate and couldn't find anything affordable. And then God got into it. And
Mm.
we had a friend of ours who was the former youth pastor at our church, who at the time was the chaplain for the Wesley Foundation, which is the Methodist ministry on TSU's campus. And
Mm-mm.
so, to make a long story short, they had some cottages on their property that used to be residential that were converted into commercial spaces. And so, as a joke, we were like, "Man, you should let us come in here and do some pop ups every now and again." He said, "I'll do you one better, man. I'll cook you up a lease and you can sign it and we can get you in here and you can build it out how you want." And so that's why I said it was a God thing, because it had been years since he had been our youth pastor at our church, but we maintained that connection, and he, thought of us to even move us in there. And we've been in there since December 2022. Built out the store.
So
And
wait a minute. Black people don't read? How you making money? Who you selling books to? What do you
so
say to that statement?
I mean, I think it's funny because that's a myth. All the people
Yes.
who we encountered have been our great supporters. They've bought books from us. They come to our pop ups when we have them. When we have events, they come out in droves. And it's a myth. Black people are reading. Black people are disseminating information. And what I find is that the people who come to our shop, they're like, man, y'all got some stuff I ain't never seen. Stuff that I wouldn't even, stuff that I didn't know that I needed. I can find at Class Bookstore, and that's really what we like to hear. We are not fans of the big A, Amazon,
Mhm.
and we know you can get on Amazon and find the book and it'll be on your desk the next day. But what we offer is community. Jeff Bezos is not coming to your neighborhood. He's not coming, to pop
No.
up in your neighborhood and really recommend books. And the algorithm for Amazon is not going to tell you, hey, we're having an event, we want you to come. It's not going to do that. And
Well,
so
can
that is what we
people
provide.
order online from your store though if they were in another city? Do you have
Yes,
a website?
we do.
What
So
is your
it's
website?
www.classbookstore.com. www.class, just like it's spelled out under my name, classbookstore.com. Our social media is everything is Class Bookstore. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all those different platforms. And we also have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter that we send out to our what we call classmates. And
I like that.
we have our different events that we promote. We have a first Sunday poetry night that we do every first Sunday of the month. We have a ladies first Saturday. So every first Saturday of the month, we have an event for ladies to come and purchase books and get discounts on things. And we have snacks and refreshments for you all. And then we also have other author events. So local independent authors, if you're looking for a place to sell your book to directly to your people, hit us up in the email, classbookstore@gmail.com. We want to be not just people who sell books to you, but we also want to provide a community space where you can just come and be. We play music in the shop, and we try to make it very homely. We call it the residency because we want you to feel like you're at home when you step in the Class Bookstore.
I feel your passion for your bookstore. I can't wait till I come back to Houston. Next couple of months, I definitely plan to come by.
Let us know.
And for those of you, I put it in the chat, but those of you who are listening again, it's classbookstore.com. Check them out. See, support black businesses. You see a book you want, order it from them. Okay, you got to wait. You might not be there the next day, but you're going to get it. Wait a little bit and think about who you're supporting. Check out the bookstore, call and say, hey, what do you recommend? Because sometimes we just need that. If you have children in your life, whether it's children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, uncle, you, whoever, books, books, books. And like he says, it's a myth that black people don't read. If so, he wouldn't be in business. Business would not be going well for him if that was true. It's the same as black people don't go to therapy. We do.
Yeah.
So, we want to support that. We like to end the show with a call to action. And my first point would be to celebrate your history. Black history is your history. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't think it's something we shouldn't know. If what you don't know, go learn. And if you're like me who loves history and loves to read, there's always more to learn. I love the idea of get to know your family history. The good, the bad, the ugly. Because guess what? Everyone's family, we can tout out those wonderful people who've done this, and there's some we don't want to talk about. But know everybody, it's your family.
Mhm.
Get to know your family history. It is important. And lastly, always vote, vote, vote. We're coming up in March on Super Tuesday. We'll have a show before then, just looking at some of the things we need to vote about. It I'm just going to say vote, 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 be an educated voter, and we'll talk more about that. Would you like to have a closing remark, David?
I just want to say again, thank you so much for inviting me to your platform to speak to your audience. I truly appreciate it from the bottom of our heart, and we'll love to see you at Class Bookstore. Thank you.
You're welcome. Check them out, guys. If you're not in Houston, you can check them out online. And I will see you next week. Oh, yeah. Check out my Well, on this page, I post a positive thought every day. So we'll talk more about that. See you next week.